All right. Can everyone hear me and see my screen? All good?
Yep.
Perfect. All right, we might get started then, and the recording is on now. So hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar. There we go. My name is Louisa, and I'm a University of Sydney Masters of Occupational Therapy student on placement with Dr. Catherine Gill at FND Australia. And it has been a fantastic experience so far. I previously didn't know anything about FND, and so I feel really grateful for the opportunity actually to learn more, and I feel quite humbled to hear the stories that each client has had. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the Wongal people, traditional custodians on the land on which I am presenting today, and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. I also acknowledge that we have a number of parties today joining us from other regions of Australia. So I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of those regions and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I recognise their connection to country and their role in caring for and maintaining country over thousands of years. And I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples with us today. So I'm studying to be an occupational therapist, where my role is to help people to engage in the activities, roles, and routines that they need and want to do. And the main way we do this as occupational therapists is through the therapeutic use of occupations. So today what I'll be discussing is how gardening as an occupation and connection to nature can help people with FND to manage the physical, cognitive, and emotional impacts of FND on their lives. So I'll discuss the benefits of gardening as a physical activity, cognitive stimulation method, and emotional wellbeing strategy in relation to managing the impact and symptoms of FND. Using gardening and nature as a way to manage symptoms and enhance wellbeing is called therapeutic horticulture. This is different from a therapy called horticultural therapy, in which a person's treatment plan is devised around their interactions with plants to meet specific treatment goals related to this interaction. So I'll just be focusing on symptom management strategies from a physical, cognitive, and emotional perspective, but not treatment. At the beginning of my placement, I spoke with a member of FND Australia who's an avid gardener and has found gardening to be a really great physically, cognitively, and emotionally beneficial activity for living with and managing her FND. She actually inspired me to do more research into the benefits of gardening and connection to nature. And so we'll be coming back to her story throughout the webinar as an example of how gardening can be integrated into your life and the effect it can have. I'll then end the webinar with some advice for family, friends, and caregivers, and a chance to ask questions and to hear your thoughts too. I absolutely love gardening and the impact it can have on our daily lives. So we'd love to hear your stories too of how gardening and connection to nature have helped you too. So we'll begin by exploring how the physical nature of gardening tasks can support bodily function and engagement through exercise and strength building, pacing, and acting as a distraction technique. As many of you may have experienced, FND impacts a person's functional capacity through fatigue, pain, limb weakness, paralysis, and functional movement disorders. When these symptoms arise, people can spend more time resting their bodies and sometimes are physically unable to use their bodies as they once did. This reduction in physical movement can have a significant impact on a person's functional capacity longer term, as reduced use of muscles and joints of our body can reduce bodily strength, control, coordination, flexibility, and endurance for physical tasks. The risk is that reduction in physical movement can lead to reduction in functional capacity longer term. I want to pause here and acknowledge, though, that there may be people listening who would like to be more active with their bodies, but are unable to due to permanent paralysis, pain, or other impacts of FND. While I'll be discussing how the physical nature of gardening can maintain bodily strength and thereby functional capacity in this section, I want to let you know that gardening and connection to nature doesn't necessarily need to require physical participation. The planning, self-expression, and environment itself that come with gardening are also extremely beneficial things, but more on that in later sections. There have been many studies done on the benefits of gardening for physical health. One done in 2008 suggests that gardening may provide the same health benefits received from non-gardening forms of physical activity by contributing to an overall active lifestyle. This was supported in 2015 as well. This is because gardening tasks can use both the upper and lower body and can involve a variety of movements. So I'll go through how the diversity of movements in gardening can be beneficial for other everyday activities and thereby longer-term functional capacity. The really great thing about gardening is that it can be quite a gentle and low-impact way to keep the body active. So starting with fine motor movements, consider activities like handling tools like a trowel or a fork, pushing soil into pots with your fingers, pinching seeds from packets, making seed holes with your fingers, weeding, and picking herbs and veggies. These all require fine motor skills, so our finger strength and dexterity, our hand grip strength, and finger and hand control and coordination. Gardening can be a great way to maintain and develop muscle strength and control, and thereby support these fine motor skills in other everyday activities, such as manipulating cutlery to eat, opening food packets, using the TV remote, and squeezing shampoo bottles. This is because the more you use your fine motor skills, the easier they become, and so gardening can provide another activity in your day to continue developing these movements. In terms of gross motor movements, consider activities like lifting pots and plants, squatting to place items on the ground, carrying a watering can, moving from standing to kneeling, leveling soil in the ground, and walking. These all require gross motor skills, so movements that involve larger muscles in our legs and arms and our core. Gardening can be a great way to continue developing these skills to maintain muscle strength, balance, and control, and to support these skills in everyday activities like vacuuming, lifting and carrying shopping bags, or lifting a child. And lastly, range of motion movements. Consider activities like reaching your arm out to smooth soil, reaching up to pick fruit, bending over to pick up tools, scooping soil with your hands, pouring a watering can, and pulling a garden hose to extend its length. These all require our body to move within its range of motion, so the extent and direction that you can move a joint or muscle. Gardening can be a way to continue moving within our range of motion to prevent reduction of this, and thereby support good range of motion in everyday activities, such as being able to position your body effectively for dressing, showering, brushing your hair, playing with a child, and accessing cupboards of different heights in your kitchen. Gardening is great because it encourages our body to move in these ways, but while doing something pleasurable. Sometimes therapy exercises can become tiring or unmotivating because they can be quite repetitive. This is definitely not to say that you shouldn't do them, but gardening can be an effective way to incorporate more movement into your day to prevent functional decline, but also gain some enjoyment from it. The FND Australia member that I talked with spent time with severe limb weakness, painful muscle spasms, seizures, and paralysis, which kept her in bed for months. I want to read you some of her story. She says, "When I eventually moved to an apartment with space to put pots, I straight away planted pots of viola seedlings. My carer filled the pots with potting mix, and I stuck the plants in the top on good days while huffing and puffing with the effort. Sometimes I couldn't even water them in. I was so exhausted. I went out each day to pick off the dead flowers to make more grow. I watered the plants. I took photos for social media. My violas grew. I picked flowers for neighbours. I got up more and more. Soon I could sit up longer each day. Now I am up almost all day, every day, 2 months later. I have gone from being bedridden indefinitely to being up and about in my wheelchair every day." I think this is such an incredible story. This member found that physically engaging in gardening helped her body to become more active. At the beginning, she could only do a few small tasks at a time, which left her huffing and puffing. But the more she stuck at it, the easier it got. And amazingly, she was able to get out of bed more often. She also found that other everyday activities became progressively easier as well because of the effect her gardening had had on her body. A particularly great aspect of gardening, which this member touched on, is that it can be adapted to any physical ability and fitness level. In occupational therapy, we like to call this process grading or pacing. Pacing is really important for managing prolonged functional capacity for all daily activities you need and want to do. Overdoing an activity one day can lead to fatigue and increased symptoms in the following days, impacting the completion of other activities. So I've provided some examples here of pacing strategies that can be used in gardening. The first one is beginning small. Managing an extensive garden can be tiring and may feel stressful, which impacts enjoyment levels. Instead, I suggest caring for 1 to 2 pot plants rather than a whole garden, spreading your tasks, So preparing a pot with soil on one day, planting a seedling on another day, and watering every 2 to 3 days after that. And sharing gardening. So you do some tasks and another person assists or completes the other tasks with you watching on. These strategies aim to reduce the physical and cognitive load on your body. They are also ways you can progressively increase your engagement as you feel comfortable. The next strategy is plant choice. Choosing plants that require less daily maintenance, particularly if you're not sharing gardening with someone else, can also help to reduce the physical and cognitive load on your body. So for example, spider plants like that one in the picture, they're quite hardy and don't require watering often. Succulents can also be good for this. The next one is location. So working with a pot on a table or in a raised garden bed, rather than working with plants in the ground, can reduce the number of times you have to move from standing to kneeling as you can stay seated, which helps to conserve energy. And lastly, adaptive equipment. Using gardening equipment that has been adapted to support engagement can help to reduce the physical load on your body and enable you to engage in gardening more easily and maybe more frequently. So I wanted to spend a bit more time looking at some examples of adaptive equipment for gardening because it's a great way to manage your unique challenges with FND and help you to pace yourself as you garden. I'll talk through a few now, but know that there are many more out there. So the first one is easy grip tools in the top left corner of the screen. So we've got a fork, trowel, cultivator, and weeder. These tools have large non-slip handles, which help to support your grip on the tools. This is particularly helpful for people who have difficulty maintaining hold on items due to their size or texture. The angled handles also provide good wrist alignment support, which helps to people who have low upper limb range of motion because you don't have to twist as much as you use them. You can also get extended handle versions of the tools to support people who may not be able to bend over or use a wheelchair or have low arm range of motion. Next, we have a trolley for wheeling garden supplies around the garden. Having a trolley to pull gardening equipment around the garden, rather than lifting and carrying each individual item, helps to manage fatigue, low limb strength, and any difficulties with mobility. The trolley reduces the amount of lifting, carrying, and walking involved. The tipping function of the trolley also helps to easily remove items that don't mind getting knocked over, like tools and seed packets. This tipping function can reduce the number of times you need to bend over and scoop items out of the trolley. Next, we have a rolling garden seat. So having an easy to move seat for the garden is helpful for managing fatigue and limb weakness. Completing gardening activities in sitting rather than standing can prolong the length of time that you're gardening for. It's quite light and has huge wheels, so requires very little effort to push or kick around your garden or balcony space if you're in an apartment. It also has a little tray underneath, so you can put your tools there instead of carrying them around. Next, we have grippy gardening gloves. The rubber grips on the inside of the gloves help to support your grasp on items. For people with weak grasp and difficulty maintaining their hold on items, particularly if it has a slippery texture, these gloves can provide a bit of extra grip support. Next, we have a retractable hose. So hoses are light and don't require much arm movement to use, which helps to conserve energy and support low upper limb range of motion and strength. The retractable function also requires low effort to manage and store the hose. If you do have access to a watering hose and someone to assist you to set this up if necessary, this is a really great option. However, sometimes apartments don't provide hoses, so a watering can is the next best option. I'd recommend using one that has a small capacity and the ability to use two hands to hold it, like the watering can in the bottom right corner of the slide, where the long handle has space for a two-handed grip. A low capacity and holding it with two hands makes it easier to carry between plants and maintain hold of, as the weight is lighter and distributed between both arms. The watering can in the top right corner is just a concept design, so you can't buy it yet. Also has a small capacity, but has more effective two-handle placement to improve holding and carrying capacity. It also has a reduced pouring angle due to the location and angle of the spout and the way the handles have been arranged. This means watering requires less range of motion and strength in your upper limbs, making plant watering less tiresome. Due to the increasing awareness and understanding of the benefits of gardening, I anticipate that there'll be more and more adaptive equipment designed in coming years. So this equipment can help to facilitate engagement in gardening. As you build up more and more functional capacity, it may be helpful to fade out some of the equipment to continue building up bodily strength and endurance, but they are definitely a helpful aid to begin engaging in gardening and assist pacing. Another aspect of gardening I wanted to discuss is how its sensory abundance can benefit physical movement through the concept of distraction. A characteristic of functional movement disorders related to FND, so things like tremors, jerks, and gait disorders, is that they can come and go. These movement disorders can make engagement in tasks difficult or for some impossible. But what research has found is that redirecting attention away from the movement itself and the symptom or deficit involved to distract the brain can significantly improve or eliminate any movement disorders, as the body then relies on automatic movements. So, for example, when focusing on walking across a room, a person may experience jerkiness, but once told to complete, say, math problems as they do this, they can walk without jerks because their brain is distracted. This idea of distraction is often used in physiotherapy rehabilitation for FND. You may have experienced this yourself. This is because it enables the physical engagement of the body to prevent muscle decline and thereby prevent functional decline. OTs too have found that sensory-based interventions can be used as a distraction technique to enhance normal movements. For example, one study saw a reduction in functional tremors when participants engaged with hand-based sensory tools due to the distracting nature of the tools. And so I want to suggest gardening as a way to distract the brain to enable physical engagement of the body in a task. Focusing on the abundance of sensory input the body receives when completing gardening tasks, rather than focusing on the movements you want your body to do in order to complete the task, can help to distract the brain to enable the body to engage. So consider the activity of leveling soil with your hand to prepare a garden bed for planting. Focusing on the reaching and sweeping arm movements you need to do to level the soil keeps your brain focused on the body, which can lead to functional movement disorders. Instead, by focusing on, say, the smell and feel of the soil, or even the sounds you're hearing outdoors, or the taste of a freshly picked tomato, while completing the task, your brain's focus is taken away from your body to its environment, creating distraction, and thereby reinstating automatic movement patterns. It may actually help to verbalize these thoughts too, to create a more effective distraction. So the variety and extensiveness of sensory input gardening tasks provide can facilitate the body's physical engagement in tasks through distraction to prevent functional decline. In this next section, I'll be discussing how gardening can provide cognitive stimulation. As I mentioned earlier, engaging in gardening in nature does not necessarily need to be physical. Often with people with FND will experience cognitive difficulties like brain fog, reduced memory and attention, and difficulty organizing their thoughts. Similarly to what we discussed with the physical aspects of gardening, helping to maintain the physical capacity of the body for other daily tasks, the cognitive aspects of gardening can also be an enjoyable way to keep your brain stimulated and practice cognitive skills like learning, organizing, memory, and attention. Neuroplasticity is the term that we use to describe the ability of the brain to change and reorganize itself in response to internal or external stimuli. The more neuroplastic the brain is, the more neural pathways or connections in our brain that are formed, and therefore the greater the improvement in function, skill, and behavior. According to sensory integration theories, providing new sensory experiences can lead to such changes in the brain's structure and function. The brain changes its structure and function in response to enrichment, and so these new sensory experiences help to stimulate the brain and encourage development of new neural connections. Gardening is an occupation that provides endless and vast sensory experiences. Tapping into our senses when completing gardening tasks helps to create a more enriched learning environment, which promotes the creation and organization of neural connections, and thereby has the effect of developing our cognitive skills. So some of these skills you can see on the slide, things like organization, flexible thinking, working memory, and planning and prioritizing. These skills continue to develop as we are faced with new sensory experiences. So sensory input can help to develop new brain connections, but gardening tasks also provide an enjoyable occupation through which to continue practicing and maintaining cognitive skills. It can help to reinforce neural pathways that are used for other day-to-day tasks. So some examples of how gardening can stimulate your brain include sensing, which I just talked about before, so perceiving and taking in the environment around you, focusing attention to, say, make a seed hole of the right size and depth, thinking about and planning the types of plants you'd like to grow, researching and learning about the care needs for a plant, remembering the last time you watered your plants, and organizing your thoughts to follow each step to pot a plant in the correct order. These cognitive skills are used in many other day-to-day tasks, and so it's important to keep using them and maintaining them. And gardening can be an enjoyable way to do this. Pacing is really important here, however, as cognitive overload can often be a trigger for fatigue, seizures, and heightened FND symptoms more generally. It can be helpful to start small. So for example, having a small garden size, spreading your tasks across days and sharing your gardening with someone else, but also using supports like lists and alarms to help you build up cognitive capacity and prevent falling into a boom and bust cycle of fatigue. In this next section, I'm going to discuss the ways that gardening and connection to nature can support emotional well-being. During my first week of placement, I was privileged to spend time meeting with members of FND Australia who shared their personal experiences of living with FND. Some of the common themes I heard were that many medical professionals did not believe their symptoms and their diagnosis took a really long time. FND has limited their capacity to engage in the things that they want to do. They have had to change their expectations of their new capacity following lots of trial and error of what they thought they could manage. They require ongoing help. They feel grief, low mood, and frustration in varying frequencies, and sometimes have difficulty understanding the why me question. Sometimes it can feel really tiring explaining what FND is to other people, how their symptoms present and change, and what support they need. Treatment can be financially straining and stressful to manage, and people around them have distanced themselves. And that these huge adjustments to their lives can significantly impact their mood, feelings of self-capacity, sense of control over their own lives, and relationship to others. I want to acknowledge that my research and listening to member stories does not make me the expert on your experiences at all. Rather, in this section, I simply want to suggest some ways in which a garden engaging with you and your engagement with a garden can support your emotional well-being in whatever stage you are in, from the common threads that I've heard in your stories and from my research. So firstly, mood. Simply being in a garden, near plants, or thinking about a garden has been found to have significant positive impacts on a person's mental health. There are, of course, the health benefits of being in a physical garden, including vitamin D and fresh air, serving to increase mood. But studies have also found that simply observing or thinking about a garden or natural scene can enhance mood by stimulating the brain's reward system. The brain's reward system is made up of a group of structures that are responsible for pleasure and motivation. This system helps to interpret whether an activity or event is pleasurable or not, stores the activity or event in a memory as an emotionally laden event. So you liked it or you didn't like it. And then these memories can be used to motivate people to repeat those activities that are pleasurable and avoid those that aren't. So images of calm, natural scenes, or happy and calm, emotionally laden memories linked to visuals, smells, tastes, textures, and sounds of nature can be used to bring pleasurable thoughts to the brain and thereby have a mood-raising or calming effect. So for example, for myself, I love Australian plants because they remind me of the peace and fresh smells of the Australian bush and my love of bushwalking. I like to buy them to have on my dining table at home when I feel stressed or sad, because the good memories associated with them make me feel happy. As another example, one participant in a research study on the impact of nature for veterans managing post-traumatic stress disorder described nature as inclusive. He said that it accepts you just the way you are, which helps him to feel calm and stable. Observing or thinking about nature in this emotionally laden way, so tied to happy memories or as a calming presence, has been found to have the effect of reducing stress, blood pressure, pulse rate, and muscle tension. These findings suggest that observing and thinking about gardens can positively impact mood. So I'd encourage you to consider what particular images or views and memories tied to nature have a mood-raising impact on you, and think about particular places you could go and be in to see these views or evoke these memories. Some examples include being in your own garden, a family or friend's garden, a local park, a photo album, a camera roll, printed images from the internet, a painting, or simply bringing those thoughts to your own mind. Another aspect of the positive impact gardens and nature can have on you is the impact engaging our senses with nature can have on managing sensory processing difficulties. I'll discuss what sensory processing dysfunction is and some ways gardening and connection to nature can help to manage it. But if you'd like to learn more about sensory processing to a deeper level, I would highly recommend joining the sensory processing webinar being held this Friday online, hosted by Isterbreck, one of my occupational therapy colleagues. She will go much deeper than I have, the scope for today, and I believe her webinar flyer has been circulated on the FND Australia Facebook page, so you can go there to find some more details. Sensory processing dysfunction occurs when there is difficulty taking in or organising sensory information, which can lead to poor sensory modulation, so the process by which our brain regulates its behavioural response to sensory input. As FND affects how the brain and body send or receive signals from each other, people with FND often experience more sensitivity to particular sensory input than others. So, for example, too much noise, too much light, strange textures or tastes can generate a physical or emotional response that is maladaptive to the situation or environment. Difficulty regulating the response to sensory information can have the effect of triggering a flight or fight response, and also impact cognitive processes like attention, memory, and learning new information. Studies done by OTs into the impact of sensory-based interventions for sensory regulation have found that these interventions do improve sensory processing and positively impact cognitive processes. So, for example, when feeling overstimulated associated with feelings of anxiety, shallow breathing, nausea, and disorganized thinking, sucking on an ice cube can have the effect of calming the nervous system's response to whatever sensory input is not being processed effectively. We call this a grounding technique. Grounding techniques help to bring a person to the present moment and to calm their bodies and mind by concentrating on something else. They help to distract from the symptoms a person is experiencing. So, for instance, feeling anxious and overwhelmed by sensory overload. In this way, I want to explore how being in or thinking about a garden can act as a grounding technique. The FND Australia member I talked with described how she would imagine flowering violas swaying in the wind to soothe her mind when overwhelmed by her FND symptoms and what she could not control. At this time, she was not able to grow her own flowers, but simply thinking about them helped to calm her mind and lift her mood. She describes this process as replacing one stressful thought with another soothing thought. Sensory processing difficulties are unique to each person and sometimes unexplainable. Some tools will work for some people and be completely wrong for other people. And what research has been finding is that many people with FND have expressed limited self-generated coping strategies for sensory processing difficulties. So what I want to encourage is exploring your sensations within nature to help you build a toolbox of those sensations that help you to regulate your responses to the sensory environment we live in to support your emotional well-being. Particularly because nature can be quite an accessible tool. It's often present in our homes and in the community. So where to begin? Finding the right sensory tools for you will involve trial and error because you'll go through a process of increasing your self-awareness and exploration. But the possibilities are endless. Consider the smells, textures, tastes, sounds, and sights of your garden that could help to calm your body. How do they each make you feel? What are you receptive to and what are you reactive to? What memories does each evoke? Maybe there's nothing in your garden yet, but there's opportunity to change this. What types of plants do you commonly see out in public or in your usual environments? How do they make you feel? So I've listed some examples of different sensory input that can help you to start thinking about your environments and how they make you feel. So for example, the sound of bamboo or grasses swaying in the wind, the smell of jasmine, lavender, sweet peas. Maybe it's the feel of lamb's ears, waxy leaf plants or lawn grass. Maybe the sight of rainbow petunias or cheery sunflowers or a bush of hydrangeas. Or the taste of fresh cherry tomatoes, basil or blueberries. And a caution here that exploration may mean that there are some sensations you come across that make you feel more stressed, uncomfortable, or overwhelmed. This is part of the exploration process, but it's important to be aware of. So when experiencing low mood or sensory overwhelm, looking at pictures of nature, thinking about your garden, and or moving into and exploring a garden space may provide the input your body needs to lift mood and calm its nervous system. So even if you are not physically doing the activity of gardening, being in that space or thinking about it can positively impact your well-being. So we've considered the resources gardens and nature provide us to support mental well-being. Now we'll consider how directly engaging in gardening and giving back to gardens and nature can support mental well-being. Many studies have found that engaging in activities like music, meditation, arts and craft, and gardening can inspire a sense of productivity, motivation, meaning, and purpose. For many people with FND, their physical capacity is significantly impaired by their FND symptoms, which can result in changes to engagement in work, paid or volunteer, caring roles, daily self-care tasks, and other daily activities like cleaning, shopping, and socializing. Receiving greater support to what you're used to, or being completely unable to complete these tasks, can significantly impact a person's sense of self-capacity, motivation to engage in activities that they can do, and self-esteem. Engaging in gardening can be a helpful way to bring a sense of productivity, self-capacity, and motivation back into your life. The process of gardening involves preparing, planting, nurturing, anticipating, and growing. These activities all center around the idea of producing something and a duty of caring, which can be rewarding and empowering and produce a sense of purpose and motivation. In many ways, it doesn't even matter what you produce or how it turns out. It's the process of creating something and involving yourself that can be equally beneficial. For the FND Australia member I spoke with, she began posting her garden on social media and picking flowers for her neighbours. She felt proud of what she'd achieved and enjoyed sharing her garden with others. She also enjoyed feeling connected to nature. She says, "I love watching pollinators of the flowers now and knowing I'm helping bees thrive." A 2016 study on the impact of a forest therapy garden as a restorative tool for veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder suggested the concept of fascination as one of the key components to a restorative environment. They define fascination as effortlessly holding the individual's attention and triggering processes of exploration. They found that engaging in activities like weeding, chopping wood, and building birdhouses had the effect of focusing their thoughts away from disturbing thoughts, similar to a mindfulness exercise. Additionally, these participants described such activities as meaningful and satisfying because they felt useful, productive, and coherent with nature. Another study describes this fascination as flow and suggests it's like meditation in everyday occupations. Flow is a state in which people experience deep feelings of gratification and elation in response to engagement in highly desired activity. It suggests that complete absorption and oneness in an activity, reduced awareness of other thoughts to do with anxiety or fear, and feelings of personal satisfaction can help people to self-regulate their emotions and dampen internal chaos and extraneous environmental stimulation. Engaging in gardening can provide a sense of productivity, satisfaction, purpose, and mindfulness, helping to build self-capacity, pride, and motivation, and distract from sad or unhelpful thoughts. Gardening, like many other forms of creative arts, can also be a form of self-expression. The size, location, plant choice and meaning, and aesthetic serve to intimately connect a garden to a person's identity. So for example, I live in an apartment and most of my surfaces either have a pot plant perched on top, dried native flowers, or a jar of water attempting to sprout a plant I found on the side of the road. I think this reflects my stage of life, my curiosity for experimenting with plants, and my love for the Australian bush. On the slide, you can see a variety of garden structures, functions, and aesthetics. We've got an indoor garden, a productive garden growing vegetables, an English cottage floral garden, and a manicured hedge garden. So all very different to each other. There are many aspects of living with FND that can be out of a person's control: when their symptoms arise, how much care and support they need, and sometimes the choices health professionals make for them. Gardening is an outlet that enables a person to take back some control in their life by being the one to make decisions on how a garden looks and functions. In this way, gardening can help to build up a person's sense of self-capacity, so their belief in what they can do, and provide a way for them to reflect their identity in their own way, not dictated by others. Having a source of ownership and identity in this way can be a helpful way to manage emotions amidst the fluctuating nature of living with FND. The FND Australia member I spoke with reflected that gardening gives me hope and a sense of control, that at any time and any day, I can take a step away from something which gives me overload, and I can take a step towards something which I find soothing. It helps put a sense of control back in our hands. So I want to end with some thoughts on how family, friends, and caregivers can be involved in gardening too. A researcher considering the role of occupational therapy for FND recognises that carers play a big role in supporting an individual's gradual move toward independence, toward learning to take risks, and toward restoring normalised relationships. FND can significantly impact a person's independence, risk-taking, and relationships. And so to finish up, I'd like to provide some quick thoughts on some ways family, friends, and caregivers can support an individual's engagement in gardening based on what we've already talked about, and through this support other life activities. So firstly, pacing. Carers can significantly support a person's engagement in gardening by how involved they are in the activity, how they help the client to pace themselves. By taking on some tasks that require considerable energy, you enable individuals to engage in some of the smaller tasks and to have this engagement more frequently because they've been able to pace themselves, which helps them to regain some independence in their activities. Secondly, supporting. Carers can also support individuals' engagement through supporting pacing strategies, for example, using adaptive equipment, reminding individuals of their strategies to manage FND symptoms when they arise, and looking out for these symptoms as well to effectively manage their capacity. This enables clients to engage in gardening longer term rather than riding a symptom boom and bust cycle. And lastly, relating. Gardening can be a fun, leisurable activity that a carer can share and enjoy with the individual. Learning together, watching together, and sharing excitement together can be a really great way to build relationship and share joy. So I want to thank everyone for joining me today and hearing my thoughts on the benefits of gardening for people with FND. I've really enjoyed researching for this project, and I'd love to hear your thoughts or any questions that you have in response. Maybe you've engaged in gardening. What's worked for you? This is a passion of mine, and so I'm keen to learn from you too and for you to teach each other. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Louisa. That was excellent. Are there any questions? So you can either jump in, unturn your mute off and ask questions or put them in the chat. Otherwise, Louisa will be sending out a handout with a summary of today's talk.
It's Vicky speaking here. I was just going to ask, is there, do you know where to buy the adaptive equipment?
Yeah,
etc.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So the little fact sheet that I've made that kind of summarizes this presentation, I've actually got a little table of the different equipment where you can buy it and how much it costs. So okay. Yeah, I'll send that out with this recording. Yeah.
Okay. I've actually been studying therapeutic horticulture myself. I love it. I'm a full-on gardener too. But have you heard that it's very hard to have any like there's no apparently education as such in Australia. Have you heard that there's any changes to that? Like I've joined Therapeutic Horticulture Australia, but there doesn't seem to be any educational qualifications in Australia at the moment.
Okay, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. I've seen that there are a few qualifications overseas that you can do, but I haven't investigated that in Australia yet. I can have a bit of a research and get back to you via email as well.
Yeah, no urgency. Yeah, I know there's a lot overseas, but not so much here at the moment. But yeah. I think that's what THA are all about. They're trying to sort of get it more well known here and have it as a career as such.
I think so, and I think more and more people are researching the benefits of gardening for a whole variety of medical conditions and disabilities. It seems to have a really positive impact in so many ways. So I think it's something that's going to just keep increasing over the next few years.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Certainly, I've seen a lot of people with FND find their symptoms are a lot better in the presence of nature. Like people have said, I've gone camping and I didn't have any seizures. But I come home and my seizure started up again. So just that connectedness with nature, it really is quite soothing and calming to the nervous system.
I can absolutely resonate with that. I was a huge gardener before my diagnosis, and I've definitely had to peel back my activities in the garden, but I will get out there as much as I can every day, even just to sit. And that reflection, Louisa, it was really, really great. I really appreciate all of that. I'm going to rewatch this later again when I can, take some more in. But I definitely think for me, it's the sound of the birds that gets me. I don't know about anyone else, but I definitely think the garden, it gives that sensation of like you've given life to all of these other things. And that I always think about, we get these little tiny fairy wrens in Canberra. And that's what I picture when I have to have those moments of like, oh, I'm not doing well. I'll just imagine that bird singing a song in my garden and go, oh, it's all okay. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it really does tap into all your senses, as Louisa was talking about.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Sam. It's very encouraging. I mean, I also, a lot of the information that I've shared today are things that I enjoy about gardening too. It's really great.
Yeah, I think all gardeners just can connect globally on the love of gardening. It's definitely, I'm very much like you. I have little, jars of everything, just trying to grow stuff everywhere. And in the parks here, you go for a bushwalk and go, oh, I don't have that grevillea. Could I maybe take a little piece? Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much for sharing. I really am going to get a lot out of this. And I think it's great for my carers because my hubby is a gardener, but I think having that support as well in how he can best assist me, and that slow step up is probably a great way of building capacity across the board with my capacity. So yeah, I think I've got a lot to take away. Thanks again.
I'm really glad. Thanks.
Great work, Louisa. It was really good. So if there's no other questions or comments, we'll wrap up. And then Louisa, once you send me the video, I'll upload it and then we can share the link to the video and the flyer.
And I guess if you have any questions or comments that kind of come up after this webinar, feel free to email me as well. I love talking about gardening, so very happy to chat over email too. Yeah. Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today.
Okay, thanks, Louisa.
Bye everyone.